My brother told our parents I forged Dad's signature on a $340,000 insurance policy to cut him out. My mother cried and said she always knew I was the selfish one. They threatened to sue me and have my law license revoked. What none of them knew was that I had already pulled the original notarized documents from the county clerk's office. The moment I laid them on the dining room table, everything they had built fell apart in under 4 minutes. This is where the story really begins, and you are not going to want to step away. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I am not the kind of person who looks for conflict. I am a 1-year-old estate planning attorney. I spend my days writing the documents that decide what happens to people's lives and money after they are gone. I believe in precision. I believe in paper trails. I believe that the truth is almost always sitting in a file somewhere, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. My brother has always known that about me, which is exactly why what he did was so reckless. He assumed that because I loved my family, I would be too afraid to use what I knew how to find. He was wrong about that. I was at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon in late October when my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost let it go to voicemail because I was in the middle of reviewing a probate filing for a client, but something made me pick up, maybe instinct, maybe the particular way the phone felt heavy in my hand. I answered. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. The first words out of her mouth were, "I need you to explain yourself, Maya." I set down my pen. My mother's voice had a register she reserved for serious things. Broken china, a car accident, my father's health scares. This was that register, but underneath it was something colder. Something that had been rehearsed. Explain what? I asked. The policy, she said. The life insurance policy your father took out in 2019. Your brother found the documents. He has been doing the responsible thing and going through the estate papers since your father passed, and he found the updated beneficiary form. The one with your father's signature that your brother says you forged. I sat very still. The office around me felt distant, like the volume had been turned down on everything. Mom, I said slowly, I did not forge anything. Your brother has the original policy on file, she said, and her voice hardened, took on that particular quality it always did when she had already made up her mind and was simply performing the formality of hearing me out. The beneficiary is you, only you. Your father's original intention was to split everything equally. Your brother has witnesses. He has his own copy of what Dad originally wanted, and it does not match what you filed. Who told him that was the original intention? I asked. Your father told him, she said. They talked about it, man to man. You weren't there, man to man. There it was, the phrase that had defined my entire childhood. I grew up in a house where my brother was consulted, and I was accommodated. He was 4 years older than me, and from the time I could understand language, I understood that the family operated on a quiet, unspoken rule. He was the heir. I was the afterthought with good grades. When I got into law school, my father was proud. When my brother dropped out of his business degree after 2 years to flip houses, my father called it entrepreneurial courage. The investments never quite worked out, but the narrative never changed. My brother was a man building something. I was a woman who had gotten lucky. My father, for all his flaws in this regard, had loved me. I knew that. He told me in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of us. He told me when he first got sick, 18 months before he passed. He sat me down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and said, "You know I trust you more than anyone with this stuff. I need you to help me get the paperwork right." And I had. I had helped him update his will, set up a small trust for my mother, and yes, update the beneficiary designation on his life insurance policy. He had made the decision himself, clearly and without hesitation. He told me he was doing it because my brother had already received nearly $80,000 in loans from him over the years that were never repaid, and this was his way of balancing the ledger before he was gone. He signed the form in front of a notary I had not chosen. One he had specifically requested because he wanted it done by someone who had no connection to me professionally. He had thought of that himself. He was more careful than people gave him credit for. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even, "I need you to tell me exactly what documents my brother showed you." "He has an email," she said, "from your father to him, from 3 years ago, that says he intended to split the policy equally. An email. My brother had an email. And his plan is... What exactly? I asked. He has spoken to a lawyer, my mother said. He believes there are grounds to contest the beneficiary designation. He is going to file suit if you do not agree to split the money voluntarily. And, Maya, he is going to report you to the state bar. He says what you did constitutes undue influence at minimum and fraud at worst. He says you took advantage of your father when he was sick and scared, and you manipulated him into signing something he did not understand. Manipulated him. My father, who had built a contracting business from nothing, who had negotiated commercial leases and read every contract anyone ever put in front of him, who had specifically requested an independent notary because he wanted no ambiguity. That man had supposedly been manipulated by his daughter into not understanding a single-page beneficiary form. I understand, I said. I hope you do, my mother replied, because I have to tell you, this has broken my heart. After everything we gave you, after we paid for your education, your bar fees, all of it. To do this to your brother, you paid for my first year of law school, I said. I paid for the rest myself. I took out loans. I worked. I clerked for free for 2 years. But I understand. Silence. Your brother wants to meet, she said. Sunday dinner. The house. He wants to sit down and give you the chance to do the right thing before this becomes something uglier. I looked at the wall of my office. Behind me on the shelf were my bar certificates, my degree, 5 years of client files representing hundreds of families who had trusted me with their most vulnerable moments. I thought about how quickly one accusation from the right person could burn all of it to the ground. I will be there Sunday, I said. Tell him I will be there. I hung up. I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a legal pad, and I started writing. This was not the first time my brother had told a story to benefit himself. When we were children and he broke the back windshield of my father's truck with a baseball, I was grounded for 3 days before my father found the ball in the yard, and the math stopped adding up. When I was 17 and my brother borrowed my college savings jar from my room and spent $200 of it on a weekend trip he didn't want to explain to our parents, my mother told me I should not have left money somewhere accessible, that it put temptation in front of him. And was that really fair to my brother? I had replaced the $200 myself, working weekends at a pharmacy. I never told my father what actually happened because I knew what would happen if I did. The story would become complicated. The truth would become a matter of perspective. And my brother would find a way to make me the difficult one for bringing it up. I was 31 years old. I had been a licensed attorney for 6 years. I had spent those years becoming very, very good at one specific thing, which was knowing where paper trails lived and how to follow them. I opened my laptop. The beneficiary form my father had signed was on file with the insurance company, which I had already received a copy of as the named beneficiary. But what I needed was more than a copy. I needed the notarization record. Notaries in our state are required to maintain a journal of every act they perform, including the signer's identification, the document type, and the date. The notary my father had chosen, a woman named Patricia who ran a mobile notary service, was registered with the county clerk's office. I had her commission number from the acknowledgement line on the form. I sent her an email that evening. I explained that I was the named beneficiary on a document she had notarized for my late father, that the document was being contested by a family member, and that I was formally requesting a copy of her notary journal entry from that date for use in any legal proceeding. I copied myself on the email and logged the timestamp. Her response came the next morning. Of course. I remember Mr. Henderson very well. He was very specific about wanting everything done properly. I will pull my journal and send you a certified copy. The journal entry arrived by email the following afternoon. It listed my father's full legal name, his driver's license number, the date, the document type, and a physical description confirming he had appeared in person and of sound mind, and without apparent duress. Patricia had noted in the remarks field, at her own professional discretion, that the signer had stated clearly that he was making this change of his own free will and had requested that she note this explicitly. My father had asked her to write that down. He had anticipated this. I stared at that line for a long time. The grief that had been sitting in my chest since he passed, compressed and professional, and held together with routine, cracked open just slightly. He had known. He had known my brother might do something like this, And he had been careful, and he had trusted me enough to count on me being careful too. I closed the laptop. I went for a long walk. I let myself cry once, alone, on a park bench, for about 10 minutes. Then I went home, changed clothes, and went back to work. Sunday came. I dressed the way I always dressed for depositions. Dark blazer, simple blouse, heels that meant I was not here to be comfortable. I printed the notary journal entry, the original insurance policy with the change of beneficiary form, and a 3-page memo I had written summarizing the timeline, the notarization, and the legal standard for contesting a beneficiary designation in our state. I put them in a folder. I put the folder in my bag. I also, because I was thorough by nature, pulled my brother's public records that week. Not because I was looking for ammunition, because in my experience, when someone moves aggressively to take money that is not theirs, there is almost always a pressure point behind it. There is always a reason the money has become urgent. What I found was not surprising. 2 civil judgments in the past 3 years. One from a contractor he had hired and not paid on a flip property. One from a private lender for a loan default. The combined total was just under $47,000. Both listed as unsatisfied. I also found that the house he currently lived in, the one he had been building equity in for years, had a notice of lis pendens filed against it 4 months ago, meaning someone was actively pursuing a legal claim on the property. The case number traced back to a hard money lender. He was behind on payments and the clock was running. He needed $340,000 because he was about to lose everything, and he needed it fast enough that waiting for a probate court to sort things out was not an option. Blaming me was the shortcut. If he could get me to agree to split voluntarily, or better, if he could frighten me into silence with the threat of a bar complaint, he would not have to prove anything. He just needed me to blink. I put the public records in the folder with everything else. I drove to my parents' house in the late afternoon. The maple in the front yard had gone fully orange, which my father used to love. He would take a photograph every October without fail. I sat in the car for a moment and looked at the tree and thought about him. Then I picked up my bag and went inside. My mother had made pot roast, which is the meal she makes when something serious needs to happen. The good china was on the table, which felt absurd given the circumstances, but was entirely consistent with how my family processed conflict, which was to wrap it in the trappings of normalcy and hope the presentation softened the blow. My brother was already there. He was sitting at the table with his wife, who looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at her phone. He had put on a collared shirt, which I noted because he rarely bothered. He was performing seriousness. Across the table from him, my mother stood at the kitchen doorway watching me come in, with an expression that was equal parts grief and accusation. "Sit down," my brother said, as if this were his house. I sat. I put my bag on the floor and folded my hands on the table. "I am glad you came," my mother said. She set a plate of bread on the table, and then sat at the end, between us, physically positioning herself as arbiter. "I am hoping we can resolve this, like adults." "So am I said. My brother leaned back in his chair. He had our father's build, broad and solid, and he used it the way men who feel insecure often do, taking up space, spreading his arms wide along the back of the chair. "Here is the situation, Maya. I don't want to make this ugly. Dad had a lot of respect for you, and I get that. But what you did was take advantage of a sick old man, and I think somewhere inside you know that. Tell me specifically what you believe I did," I said. He blinked. He had been expecting a different opening. "You got him to change the beneficiary designation. He was on medication. He wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. You were always in his ear about finances, always the one handling the paperwork. It was a classic undue influence situation, and any attorney worth their license would recognize it." "Do you have an attorney?" I asked. "I have spoken to one," he said. "And what did that attorney advise you regarding the standard of proof required to overturn a beneficiary designation under undue influence in this state?" His jaw tightened. "That's not how this conversation is supposed to go. I am just curious," I said. "Because the standard is actually quite high. You would need to demonstrate that the decedent lacked testamentary capacity, that the influencing party had a position of trust, that the result was unnatural, and that the influence was operative at the time of signing. You would need medical records, testimony, and documentation. And you would be going up against a notarized instrument signed by a man who, by all accounts, was mentally sharp until the last 3 weeks of his life. That is a difficult case. My mother made a small, distressed sound. That's not the point, my brother said. What is the point? I asked. The point is that he told me. He told me it was going to be split equally. He said that to me directly. I have an email from 3 years ago, I said, in which he expressed an intention he later changed. People are allowed to change their intentions. That is, in fact, the entire purpose of an updatable beneficiary form. The last executed document controls. That is black letter law in every state. He turned to my mother. You see what she's doing? You see how she talks? This is exactly what she did to Dad. She sounds so reasonable. She sounds so in control. And the whole time she is manipulating the situation. My mother looked at me. I could see the war in her face. She loved me. She also loved him more, had always loved him more in the specific way that parents sometimes love the child who needs more reassurance, and she had spent 40 years constructing a worldview in which his failures were circumstances, and my successes were suspect. I recognized this moment. I had been here before, in smaller rooms, about smaller things. I had always let it slide. I had always decided the peace was worth more than the truth. I was not going to do that today. Mom, I said quietly, I want to show you something. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I placed it on the table. That's just paperwork you made, my brother said immediately. Open it, I said to my mother. She looked at my brother. Then she looked at me. Then she reached out and opened the folder. The document on top is the change of beneficiary form Dad signed in March of 2022. You will see at the bottom the notarization from Patricia, along with her commission number and her stamp. My mother turned the page. Behind that is the certified copy of Patricia's notary journal entry from that date. It documents that Dad appeared in person with valid identification, that she verified his identity, and that he was of sound mind. It also documents, in the remarks column, that he specifically requested she note that he was making this change of his own free will. My mother's finger moved to that line. She read it twice. My brother shifted in his chair. Notaries write whatever they're told to write. That would be a serious violation of notarial law, I said, and Patricia has been a commissioned notary in this county for 19 years with a clean record. But you are welcome to make that argument to a judge. It still doesn't prove. There is one more document in the folder, I said, behind the notary record. My mother turned the page. Those are public court records. 2 civil judgments against you, totaling $47,000, both currently unsatisfied. And a lis pendens filing on your home from 4 months ago, from Ironwood Capital, a hard money lender. The silence at the table was total. My brother's wife stopped looking at her phone. You're losing the house, I said, keeping my voice level, not angry, clinical. You needed this money fast enough that you could not wait for a proper legal challenge, which you likely knew you would lose. So instead you called Mom. You told her I had forged Dad's signature. And you arranged this dinner hoping I would agree to split voluntarily rather than risk a bar complaint, which you also knew, or at least hoped, would scare me into compliance. My brother stood up. This is garbage. This is harassment. You had no right to pull my financial records. They are public records, I said, available to anyone with a Pacer account and a county clerk's login. I have both. You are unbelievable, he said. He looked at my mother. Mom, she is sitting here attacking me. At Dad's table. In Dad's house. This is who she is. This is exactly who she has always been. My mother was not looking at him. She was still looking at the folder. Her hand was resting flat on the notary journal entry, on the line where Patricia had written what my father had asked her to write. He asked her to put that in writing, my mother said, almost to herself. Mom, my brother started. He asked her to write that he was doing it freely. Her voice was very quiet. He knew you might do this. That is not. Did you tell me she forged his signature? My mother asked. I told you there were questions about how it was obtained. Did you tell me she forged his signature? My mother repeated. The silence stretched. You told me to call her and tell her she needed to explain herself, my mother said. You told me the document was fraudulent. Those were your words. Fraudulent. My brother sat back down. The performance had run out of material. His wife put her phone in her purse and looked at the table. "I was going to lose the house," he said. His voice had changed. The bluster was gone, and what was underneath was just tired and scared. "I made some mistakes." The market turned. The lender was not flexible. "I thought if I could just get through this quarter." "So you decided to accuse me of a crime," I said. "You decided to threaten my license. You called Mom and told her I had taken advantage of Dad when he was sick, and you were going to let me sit here today and either fold or let you file a report with the bar, and either way you would walk out of here with money that my father specifically, deliberately, and legally chose not to leave you." He didn't answer. "You used Dad," I said, and this was the part I had not planned to say, but it came out anyway, quiet and even. "You used his death, and you used her grief, and you used the fact that everyone in this family has always been more willing to believe the worst of me than to ask me a single question. You knew that. You counted on it." My mother made a sound. It was not a word. It was a sound that came from somewhere deep, the sound of a belief collapsing. "I want you to leave," she said. She was not looking at me. She was looking at my brother. "Mom, you don't mean that. I made pot roast," she said, her voice strange and flat. "I made it because this is serious. Because I thought this was serious. I thought my daughter had done something to your father, and I made pot roast." She looked up. "Get out of my house. You're not serious. Get out." She stood. She was 63 years old, and she stood like she was planted. "Take your wife and get out. I will call you when I am ready to speak to you, and I do not know when that will be." My brother looked at me. I did not look away. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired and sad, and very certain that my father would have felt both those things too. He got up. His wife was already standing. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair, and he walked out without speaking, and his wife followed, and the front door closed. My mother sat back down. She looked at the folder for a long time. Then she closed it. "You called me the difficult one," I said. "When I was 12, and I told you he had taken money from my room. You told me I had made it too easy for him." She put her hand over her mouth. "I am not saying this to hurt you," I said. "I am saying it because it has been a long time, and I think it needs to be said before anything else can happen." "I know," she whispered. "I have known for a long time. I did not know how to fix it without admitting that it was broken." I reached out and put my hand over hers. She was smaller than I remembered, or I had stopped paying attention to how small she was. "I am not going anywhere," I said, "but some things have to change." She nodded. She did not speak for a little while. Then she stood up and went to the kitchen and came back with 2 plates and served the pot roast she had made for a conversation that had turned out to be entirely different from the one she had planned. We ate. We talked, carefully at first, then more honestly than we had in years. She told me she had started to see a therapist after my father passed, that she was working through some things she had been carrying for a long time. I told her I was glad. I meant it. I drove home in the dark, through neighborhoods going quiet, the orange maples black against the sky. The bar complaint never came. My brother, it turned out, had spoken to his attorney with enough specificity about his actual plan that the attorney had declined to send anything on his behalf. My brother knew that without a credible challenge, he had nothing to stand on, and a bar complaint filed in bad faith has its own consequences. The insurance company processed the claim 6 weeks after the dinner. The money arrived in my account on a Thursday morning. I sat with it for a moment, thought about my father sitting at that kitchen table asking me to help him get the paperwork right, and then I transferred a portion into a separate account that I set aside without touching, while I figured out what I actually wanted to do with it. My brother lost the house in December. The lender proceeded with the foreclosure when the lis pendens was not resolved. He and his wife moved into an apartment rental in a town about 40 minutes away. He called my mother twice in the first month, both times asking for money. She told him the same thing each time. "I love you, but I cannot help you dig out of this one. Call me when you want to talk." She told me about those calls herself. She did not ask me to weigh in. She had started making her own decisions about him, on her own timeline, and I was not going to rush her. 2 months after the dinner, I got a text from my brother. It was long and careful, and had clearly been rewritten several times. It acknowledged that he had accused me falsely. It said he had been desperate and ashamed and had made a decision he could not take back. It asked if there was any path towards something other than permanent estrangement. I read it sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, engine running. I thought about the little girl who had gotten grounded for cookies she did not eat. I thought about the teenager who replaced $200 in silence because the truth was too inconvenient for everyone's preferred version of events. I thought about my father asking a stranger to write down that he was acting freely because he knew his own son well enough to know a written record might someday be necessary. I typed a reply. It was short. It said, "I am not interested in estrangement. I am not interested in pretending. If you want to have a real relationship, I am open to that conversation. But it starts with you understanding that I will not be the responsible one who quietly absorbs the damage anymore. Let me know if you want to talk on those terms." I put the phone in my cup holder and went inside and ordered a coffee. He replied 3 days later. He said he understood. "We will see. Some ledgers take longer to balance than others. I have learned to be patient. I have learned that the truth does not need to be loud to be permanent. It just needs to be documented. It needs to be filed in the right place, clearly signed, and witnessed by someone with nothing to gain and everything to lose by lying." My father understood that. He raised a daughter who understood it too. I think, in the end, that was always the point.